These are videos you can never watch at night. We all know how there's some videos where you just can't watch them at night because they're that scary. Well, in this series, I'll be showing you all of those videos. So be ready to get terrified.
Who are you?
Please let me in.
Huh?
Please help me.
What? What's wrong with you?
It is to me.
Did what?
It took my daughter.
Hurt her?
Please let me inside.
Well, I know I'm not sleeping after watching that video. This video has been going viral recently and nobody knows the origins of it. It shows what appears to be a ghostly woman standing outside of some man's window at night. And she says something took her daughter and did this to her. But nobody knows what that is. The man who uploaded the video hasn't updated anybody on if he's seen her again, or if he's okay, leaving people to worry about him. But I can't imagine looking out my window at night and seeing this.
This little girl was kidnapped in 2018 and has just been found. On the 25th of October 2018, 4-year-old Aranza Lopez was on a supervised visit with her biological mum. Her mum, Esmeralda, was being investigated over abuse allegations, so Aranza was actually in foster care at the time. It was arranged that the pair would have a supervised visit at a Washington shopping centre. However, during the visit, Esmeralda requested to take Aranza to the toilets and used the opportunity to snatch the little girl in a stolen vehicle. The FBI were notified and a huge search for Aranza and even advertised a $10,000 reward. It wasn't until a year later that Esmeralda was found and arrested, but there was still no sign of the little girl. That was until last month. She was recovered by Mexican authorities in February in western Mexico. In 2021, Esmeralda was actually extradited back to Washington state and pled guilty to second-degree kidnapping and robbery. She was sentenced to 20 months in prison.
Behind me is Hall of Fame boxer Sugar Ray Robinson. He once backed out of a fight because he had a dream that he killed his opponent. Obviously, he didn't want to do that. However, he talked to a priest, and the priest actually convinced him to go through with the fight, and nothing was going to happen. He knocked Jimmy Doyle out cold, and the next day, Doyle was pronounced dead at the hospital. Robinson said he stood over Doyle just like in his dream, and the referee really didn't take into account how badly injured Doyle was. Doyle was stumbling and reaching for an imaginary rope. That's when they called the doctors in, and then they rushed him to the hospital on an ambulance. They suspected it was a blood clot in his brain, so they rushed him for surgery. However, he didn't wake up 17 hours later from his coma. Charges were pressed against Robinson, but were dropped because, it's boxing, this is gonna happen, it's not on purpose. Robinson found out that Doyle wanted to buy his mother a home after this match. Obviously, he could not now because he's dead. So, Robinson used the earnings from his next 4 matches to buy Doyle's mother a house. Super honorable guy for doing this. This is just an unfortunate case of when dreams do come true in a bad way. Let me know what you guys think about this story in the comment section below, and as always, these videos are for informational purposes only.
This is the most disturbing episode in cartoon history. At Nickelodeon Studios, the lead directors and animators came to a meeting one day and began to play this episode of SpongeBob. And it was titled Fear of the Krabby Patty. The episode starts with Squidward playing the clarinet in front of a big crowd. Then suddenly the whole crowd begins booing him off stage, including SpongeBob. And all of their eyes were turning bloodshot red, which is just very creepy. The episode then cuts to Squidward sitting on the edge of his bed crying. But he wasn't crying tears, he was crying blood. The most unsettling part about this though is that there is no sound in this scene at all. It's just completely silent while this all is happening. Then suddenly 2 pictures of dead mutilated kids then pop up on the screen randomly. It only lasts for a quick second, then goes back to Squidward crying. Then you begin to hear very faint evil laughter. Then Squidward looks directly at the viewer and grabs a shotgun. The camera then slowly zooms out as you hear a voice saying to Squidward, "Do it, do it." Squidward then shot himself in the head, killing himself. And the animators and directors have no idea where it came from or who made it.
This woman screamed, "I don't want to die," as she was dragged to her death in a horrifying theme park incident. Kelty Byrne was a Canadian student animal trainer and competitive swimmer. She was working at Sealand of the Pacific to earn extra money, and this involved being trained to work with orcas, otherwise known as killer whales. In controversial theme parks such as Sealand of the Pacific and SeaWorld, huge animals are either bred in captivity or traumatically captured and ripped apart from their families and natural habitats for humans' entertainment. On February the 20th, 1991, Kelty was working a shift and 3 whales were in one of the pools, including the infamous Tillicum. In a horrific turn of events, Kelty accidentally slipped and fell into the whale pool and attempted to grab onto the edge and save herself. However, before she could do so, she was grabbed by one of the whales that dragged her into the pool. The 3 whales then began throwing Kelty around, with many speculating that they may have simply thought this was a game. Others theorised that the whales were so traumatised and angered by their lives in tiny little pools that they took it out on Kelty. She was dragged under the water and then back up, screaming, "I don't want to die." After this horrific ordeal, she eventually drowned. It's reported that she was absolutely covered in bruises, was completely battered, and also covered in teeth marks.
These are disturbing photos everybody should see, part 1. Up first, this is Amara Sanchez. And this picture has such a disturbing and tragic backstory. She was a 13-year-old Colombian girl who was trapped and killed by a landslide when she was 13 years old. Her legs got stuck in roof bricks and the rescue team couldn't free her from the water and the debris. She died there after 60 hours of pain. Just imagine being stuck and seeing everybody around you trying to help you, but there's no way to get you out. Has to be one of the worst things to experience, I think. Next up is this picture. At first glance, it just looks like scratches on the wall, but once you find out who caused these scratches, it's insanely disturbing. These are scratches on the wall inside the Auschwitz gas chambers. This picture from the concentration camp could be the scariest picture in the world. These lines can clearly show the pain of helpless people fighting for their life. I can't even imagine this. Finally are these pictures, and at first glance, they just look like shadows. But these are actually shadows of vaporized people from the atomic bombs. Just imagine living and being present in the moment at 1 second, and then the next second you're just completely gone. And almost like you never even existed. This is just sad, and let's hope nuclear bombs never get dropped on Earth again.
Have you ever heard about John Bonet? 6-year-old girl, 6 years old. She was born to a wealthy family. On December 25th, so Christmas Day of 1996, they were out celebrating Christmas with friends, family, and then they ended up coming back home. The next morning comes, Patsy calls the cops saying that she found a ransom note, and it's about John Bonet.
911 emergency. We're in 515th Street. What's going on there, ma'am? We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please. Explain to me what's going on, okay?
7 minutes later, the cops end up pulling up, and they find nothing. But things got fucked up when the mom and the dad invited a bunch of their friends and family members to come to the house, touching everything in the scene, contaminating it with their fingerprints. And then 8 hours pass. The dad comes running up from the basement. Apparently she was found hidden in like a utility room. They do some autopsy on the body. She died from suffocation and blunt force trauma. Still to this day, no one figured out who the killed John Bonet Ramsey, and a bunch of conspiracy theories had came up. The first theory was the parents. They avoided all talks with the police for at least 3 weeks. No police interviews at all. And the only people that they did talk to was the media, newspaper outlets. And also, during this whole thing, they let their son sleep through everything. Whenever they found out that she was missing, they didn't wake him up to see if it was okay or whatever. The paper, the notepad, and the pen that was used for the ransom note was found in the family's house.
That's too sus, bro.
And the fact that there was no sign of a break-in, bro. Like, the fact that, why would you leave a ransom note and then just leave without anything?
I feel like they did it, but we just don't know why.
They made both parents write a document so they could...
What if I told you the lady behind me was a serial killer and she turned her victims into soap bars? This is Italian serial killer Leonarda Cianciulli. Now, in the 1930s and 40s, she had a really good reputation of making good bars of soap and tea cakes. It was later discovered she killed 3 women and used their remains to conceal the murder and put them inside these bars of soap. She would invite the victims over to her house, drug them, kill them, dismember them, and then incorporate their bodies into the soap bars. She went into great detail when she was caught by authorities of how she makes these soap bars. It was insane. She said this one went onto the boiler like the others. After a while, it was fat and creamy, and she added some cologne to it, and then she said this was the most creamy and best bar of soap she ever made. Now, if you think that's crazy, listen to why she did this. She got a prophecy from a fortune teller telling her that she needs to sacrifice humans or her children will be in danger. After she was caught, she spent about 30 years in prison and then 3 more years in an asylum. She would also take the women's jewelry and belongings and sell it off, increasing her income even more. People were different in the craziest ways back then. Let me know what you guys think about this story in the comment section below, and as always, these videos are for informational purposes only.
murder case inspired by the movie Scream. These two guys named Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk, they were 16 years old. Them wanted to be these amateur filmmakers led them to the idea of documenting everything to the murder of Cassie Jo Stoddart and mocked other serial killers, saying how like we're gonna be more famous than them, we're gonna be better than them.
We're gonna be murderers, baby. Like Ted Bundy, like the Hillside Strangler, the Zodiac Killer.
Those people are more amateurs compared to what we're gonna be.
On September 22nd, 2006, she was gonna house at her aunt and uncle's house. And that Friday, Cassie's boyfriend pulled up to the house to watch a movie. Also brought their classmates, Brian and Tori. At some point during the night, Brian and Tori quote-unquote left the house. Not knowing that before they left, Brian ended up going to the basement, unlocking the door, so then whenever they came back, it'll be easier for them to go inside. They go back inside, cut the power out from an electrical panel from the basement. They make some noise trying to lure Cassie down, but it doesn't work. Eventually, the boyfriend, he ends up calling his mom, saying, "Can you pick me up or can I stay the night?" Because he doesn't want to leave Cassie alone. The mom refuses, but says Cassie's welcome to come to our house. Cassie just says no because she took the responsibility of house sitting. He leaves, and that's when Brian and Tori try to lure her with more noise, but it doesn't work. They get frustrated. They go to the living room where she's sleeping, and that's when they stab her 30 times. And then, since they were recording this whole they recorded the aftermath of them killing her.
This is not a fucking joke.
I'm sick.
I stabbed her in the throat and I saw her lifeless body just disappear. Dude, I just killed
And also,
This is Liminal Land Explained, and if you never heard of this, count yourself lucky because it's terrifying. In 1989, a theme park in New Mexico closed its doors forever after a mass disappearance of visitors occurred. The park was called Liminal Land, and if you go on their website, you are shown images that are both familiar but oddly terrifying. An eerie sense of dread washes over you the deeper and deeper you dig into this mystery. On the website, it even says lose yourself in Liminal Land, which I don't even know is safe to do. A password-protected part of the website that people cracked leads us to an unsettling image of Moloch, which is a powerful being associated with child sacrificing, making this theme park and all of the disappearances even that more weird. But whatever happened at Liminal Land is still developing, and it seems in time we will know the truth about what happened here as the mystery keeps unfolding. One of the disappearances at Liminal Land is Lena Sorensen. She brought her first grade class to Liminal Land in the winter of 1984. While there, Lena decided to take the children to the park's Paradise Playrooms. But Lena remained with the children for only 7 minutes before she suddenly left the building through the rear exit. The children were left alone for 8 hours and never noticed she left. Lena's body was discovered in a patch of dirt behind the Liminal Land anomaly. The following photo I'm about to show you is an illustration of her facial structure after her body was recovered. Just to warn you, this is extremely terrifying. This is what Lena's face looked like after they found her. This is extremely sinister, and what is going on at Liminal Land?
This YouTuber died after asking his girlfriend to shoot him in the chest in a stunt that they'd hoped would go viral. Pedro and Mona Lisa had been documenting their everyday lives in Minnesota in 2017. They posted regular videos of pranks and stunts and had gained over 200 subscribers on YouTube. Mona Lisa had posted on social media on June 26, 2017, saying, "Me and Pedro are probably going to shoot one of the most dangerous videos ever." She then pointed a Desert Eagle handgun at this book that Pedro was holding in front of his chest, and she fired a bullet from 30 centimeters away. They'd experimented with the gun and a book before, and the book had actually stopped the bullet, but this time it went straight through and hit Pedro in the chest, and in front of around 30 onlookers, including their 3-year-old son, Pedro fell to the ground. Mona Lisa, who was pregnant with their second child at the time, frantically dialed 911 and told them that she'd shot her boyfriend, but Pedro was pronounced dead at the scene. Mona Lisa was arrested and she pleaded guilty to second-degree manslaughter. It was determined that the foolish stunt was dreamed up, planned and executed by Pedro, and that Mona Lisa wrongfully and tragically relied on his assurances that the stunt was safe. She was sentenced to just 6 months in prison as well as 10 years supervised probation. She is allowed to serve half of that prison sentence, and she's allowed to do that in 30-day increments over the next 3 years.
If I didn't know this was a true crime case, I would think it was a disturbing horror film. On the morning of the 7th of October 2022, a barefoot woman was running around Excelsior Springs, Missouri, bashing on people's doors. Witnesses describe her looking like she came straight from a horror film and she was calling for help. She'd been beaten, held captive, and SA'd for weeks. The woman was a shocking sight. She was covered in injuries and was wearing a bin bag. Disturbingly, she was gasping for breath as she had a very tight metal collar locked around her neck. It was a nurse who opened the door to her and let her come in. The nurse started to call police, and at this point the woman panicked. She warned her that the captor would kill her and claimed that he had killed her 2 friends. When police got there, the woman explained that a man called Timothy had captured her the month prior. He'd been holding her hostage this whole time. She said he'd been keeping her locked in the basement and had been SAing her. Disturbingly, she told police that he actually had a young son who lived at the house with him. When Timothy had taken his young son to school the one day, she used it as her opportunity to escape. Police made their way to the home of 39-year-old Timothy Hazlitt Jr. and found the property did in fact have a basement like the woman described. Timothy was arrested and is facing 9 charges including first-degree kidnapping. He's being held on a $3 million bond and faces 5 life sentences. Before his arrest, police were actually called to his address 3 times. Twice they were asked to do welfare checks, and this was from an employer and also family members. Police have searched his home with cadaver dogs and they haven't yet released what they know.
Is this a coincidence, conspiracy, or was it planned? Okay, so these are crypto billionaires that all died within the same month, and the circumstances are very suspicious. Up first, Nikolai Mushigan, co-founder of MakerDAO, was found dead on a Puerto Rican beach. This occurred on the morning of October 28th, 2022. And the crazy thing is, hours before this happened, he posted this. He also previously tweeted about evil people in the central banking cartel who want to blackmail him and kill him. Next, on November 22nd, Javier Biasco died at a very exclusive hotel. Initially, his lawyer reported that he accidentally fell off the 5th floor balcony, but later reports say he jumped to his death in the presence of witnesses. And the very next day, the 30-year-old co-founder of Amber Group, Titanian Kullander, reportedly died unexpectedly in his sleep. And there is yet to be any medical explanation for what could cause such a young man to die suddenly in his sleep. 2 days later, Russian crypto billionaire Vyacheslav Taran got into a helicopter crash and he died. Another passenger who was scheduled for the flight avoided death by canceling at the last minute, which is very strange. Next up is billionaire Bob Lee, who is the Cash App founder, and he was found dead after a stabbing. There have been no reports or any possible suspects. And just 2 days later, the Federal Reserve banking system is set to launch its own Cash App called FedNow. This is all very strange, but let me know what you think. Did they fake their death to start a new life? Were they intentionally killed by the government, or is this just a huge coincidence?
This is one of the most heartbreaking true crime cases that I've ever heard of. It happened in 2017 and it's still unsolved, so let's talk about it. This is Maggie Long. She was a 17-year-old senior at Platte Canyon High School when she was found brutally murdered in her Bailey, Colorado home. It was December 1st, 2017 when Maggie left her high school to run home and grab some water and cookies. Her plan was to go back to the high school after picking up the snacks to attend a concert that she helped organize. But when she got home, she was attacked by at least 3 people who were in the middle of robbing her home. A physical fight then broke out between Maggie and the suspects. They ended up burning down her home, and sadly, Maggie was burned alive. The assailants then stole a handgun, an AK-47 style rifle, 2,000 rounds of ammunition, a green safe, and jade figurines. Authorities arrived at the home around 7 p.m. after a 911 call came in stating that the house was on fire and that there were people inside causing damage. The call reported that there was at least 1 man inside the home. When authorities arrived and after putting out the fire, they found Maggie's remains and they ruled her death as a homicide. Sketches of the potential suspects were released in 2019, but authorities stated that at least at the time, they may have been injured in the fire, and it was possible that they have changed their appearance. They also said that it's possible that the suspects sold their cars and moved away. Maggie's murder was originally classified as a crime of opportunity, but after reviewing the case in 2021, the FBI reclassified it as a hate crime. It's now been 7 years, and whoever killed Maggie is still out there. Right now, there's a $75,000 reward for information leading to an arrest and conviction. If you have any information about the murder of Maggie Long, please call the Maggie Long Task Force tip line at 239-4243.
Does anybody remember this guy? This is Kyle Braun, aka the Glonky guy, and he went viral for this video.
I'm pretty glonky. Say what? I'm fine. I'm pretty fine. What? Yeah, I'm good. How are you? I'm good. Can you finish these lyrics real quick? Okay. Back home again. I can't wait to get back on the road again. Back again. Dude, like front of backers? Like, I don't know if I know the song. Just living. Back home again. Back home again. In Indiana land. Damn, man.
Everyone found it absolutely hilarious, but did you know that last year he almost became a murderer? In April 2023, reports came in Indiana of a woman in the street with multiple stab wounds and a kitchen knife sticking out of her skull. When emergency services arrived, she identified her own son, Kyle, as her attacker. She was alert and conscious enough to speak to police. She said that Kyle had attacked, beaten and stabbed her in her kitchen before fleeing the scene. She was obviously rushed to hospital for emergency surgery to remove the knife from her head. It soon came to light that there was already a warrant out for Kyle after he'd fled from a mental health facility in Ohio. And now he was facing a charge of attempted murder for trying to kill his mum. Kyle was eventually tracked down even though he had cut the tracker from his ankle, and he was remanded in custody without bond. I actually cannot find any more information on Kyle since his arrest, but my guess is if he was in a state to stand trial, he's probably in prison right now, and if he wasn't, he's probably been placed in a secure mental health facility.
This is one of the most disgusting and evil cases I've heard of recently. On the 7th of December 2017, teacher Thelma Boinville was desperately trying to make some extra money. She was doing a cleaning job to earn extra money for her family, and the job suited her as her 8-year-old could come along and play while she worked. This was really handy as it meant she didn't have to fork out for childcare. She set out cleaning some holiday homes on the day in question, and her daughter waited in the car. The spot was a lovely scenic place called Kelky Beach. However, instead of walking in on a normal holiday rental to clean, she walked into a nightmare. Stephen Brown and his girlfriend Haley Dangerand were in the middle of robbing the place. They were scouring through drawers and wardrobes, hunting for valuables to steal. With Thelma walking in, their plan had been foiled. They decided they needed to dispose of their only witness. The evil pair tied up the mother, whose daughter waited unsuspectingly in the car outside. They used a machete, a knife, and a hammer to murder the innocent woman. But the horror was far from over. They exited the holiday home and came across Thelma's young daughter waiting in the car. They callously told the young girl, "We killed your mum," and then bound her up and gagged her. Sickeningly, they then took the 8-year-old into the home where they'd killed her mum and left her there tied up. The 2 Australian tourists who were renting the holiday home then came back and found the crime scene. The 2 killers were tracked down hours later in Thelma's car, which they'd stolen and driven off in. Haley was actually wearing her victim's earrings at the time. They actually begged for the officers to just shoot them and end their lives, but they wouldn't get away that easily. Thelma's husband Kevin wasn't actually allowed to see his wife's body due to the extent of her injuries. The autopsy revealed that she'd fought for her life, with many defensive wounds indicating a struggle. Since the murder, Stephen and Haley have both tried to blame each other. Stephen was found guilty of second-degree murder and apparently showed no emotion as the verdict was read out. Haley is currently awaiting trial.
Comic book writer Gerard Jones is a convicted pedophile. And this is going to rain on a lot of people's parades. A lot of people don't know about this, but let's talk about it. So early in his writing and drawing career, Gerard worked for the company National Lampoon. And as he worked his way through the industry from 1987 to 2001, he wrote for a number of massive companies. These companies included Marvel Comics, DC Comics, Dark Horse Comics, and he worked on series like Pokemon, The Green Lantern, Justice League, Batman, just so many classic stories. You can even see right here, G. Jones, he's credited on a lot of these issues. So things look to be going really well for Gerard in his life. He was a very well-renowned comic writer, but then in 2016, he was arrested for some pretty disturbing things. In 2016, he was arrested for distributing and possessing CP. And at first, he pled not guilty. He said, "I didn't do it." But then in 2018, a couple years later, he pled guilty. He admitted to it. And in his admission, he made some very, very disturbing statements. Basically, the authorities stated that they had found multiple electronic devices inside of Gerard's home, and that those devices contained tens of thousands of images and videos depicting CP. Tens of thousands, terabytes of this disgusting content. So he was sentenced to a measly 6 years in prison for the possession of all of this filth, and sadly, as of December 2022, Gerard Jones is free. He's no longer in prison, he's out in the free world again. I hate having to ruin people's days by talking about this stuff, but I mean, if I wasn't suggested this story by people online who watch my TikTok videos, I never would have known this about this guy. And I think it's important that we keep talking about these issues, because if we just silently let people commit these crimes like this, then they will continue to happen.
This little girl got revenge on her killer from beyond the grave. On the 25th of January 2005, Katie Coleman finished school and went back to her home in Indiana, United States. Katie was 10 years old and lived with her mum and dad and sister. At 3 p.m. that day, her mum asked her to go to the dollar store to get toilet roll. Now, Katie knew the area well and it wasn't really far to go. After getting the toilet roll from the shop, Katie stopped at the bank to get a lollipop for her way home. However, when Katie's dad returned home, the little girl still wasn't back. Her parents called police and a few days later an Amber Alert was issued. A witness came forward to say that they'd seen a girl who looked like Katie in a truck. The driver was described as a skinny white man about 6 feet tall with short dark hair and fair complexion. Tragically, 5 days after going missing, Katie's body was found. It was in a creek just a few miles from her home. Disturbingly, her hands and feet were tied and she had been SA'd. It was determined that her cause of death had been drowning. 20-year-old Charles Hickman rang the police to confess. He said he and another man had abducted Katie after she'd witnessed a substance deal. He said they tried to scare her into not saying anything and they tied her up, but she ended up falling in and drowning. Disgustingly, this turned out to be a false confession. This obviously wasted police time and caused massive amounts of distress to Katie's family. Police continued to look for evidence and they did find a cigarette butt near to Katie's body. They tested it for DNA and it matched a man called Anthony Stockelman. Police compared the DNA on the cigarette butt to the DNA on Katie's body and it was a match. Anthony, a father of 2 young boys, was in the area that day visiting his mother. He entered a guilty plea and was given life in prison without parole. But this is not the only punishment that Anthony would receive. Now, Anthony claims that he was under the influence of extreme mental or emotional disturbance during the crime. He said this is because his father had died 6 months prior. Regardless, Anthony was imprisoned. Unlucky for Anthony, he was actually housed in a prison with Katie's cousin. Jared Harris was serving a sentence for burglary and was in the same wing as Anthony. Jared forcibly tattooed the words Katie's Revenge across Anthony's forehead. He wanted to brand Anthony for life for killing his young cousin.
This couple and their vehicle vanished into thin air. This is the disturbing story of Richard Petroni Jr. and Danielle Imbo. So Danielle and Richard were married, but they were separated at the time that they went missing. But people who knew them said that they were an on and off again type couple where they would get together, break back up, and so forth. And on February 19th, 2005, the couple joined another couple for drinks at a place called Abilene's on South Street in the city of Philadelphia. Now, if you've ever been to South Street in Philadelphia, it is a very, very busy place pretty much at all times of the night. I actually got tattooed on this street right here. And there's so many restaurants, bars, businesses there that there are always people around. So if something strange would have happened to this couple here, it definitely would have been seen by somebody. But on that evening, they left the bar that they were at around 11:45 p.m. and witnesses last saw them while they were walking to their truck. The car that they were in was a 2001 Dodge pickup truck. And like I said before, this was the last time the car and the couple would ever be seen. So after Danielle and Richard were seen leaving that bar on South Street, their cell phone records showed no more further activity and their personal finances also showed no activity. Media accounts have also stated that Danielle and Richard were very, very close to their children and their families and they would have no reason to disappear. Now, the authorities have tried looking at this from every possible angle. They've investigated this as a possible murder for hire. They've searched all the local rivers and tributaries, and they've even looked into the theory that these two may have wanted to disappear themselves, but no evidence has ever been found as to where both of these people went. The group Exploring with Purpose, whose entire goal is to locate missing persons, actually took on this case in 2022 and used all of their equipment to even search more local rivers and places where this couple could have maybe driven off a bridge or into the water, and they still found nothing. And this is a case that I don't think we'll ever see any true resolution in, and it haunts me. I mean, what the hell happened?
This is probably one of the worst true crime cases that I've ever heard of. In August of 2019, David Sumney brutally beat his mom to death and then took 277 photos on his cell phone of the gruesome crime scene. The photos included selfies with her body, posing with blood smeared on his face, and even a photo of him giving a thumbs up. After he brutally killed her, he put her body in the bathtub and proceeded to record himself washing off her corpse. When the family couldn't get a hold of 67-year-old Margaret Sumney on August 31st, 2019, they knew something was wrong. After trying for 2 days with no success, they had the police conduct a welfare check at her Pennsylvania home. When authorities couldn't reach Margaret, they forcibly entered the home where they discovered shattered glass everywhere and blood smeared on the walls and furniture. Upon investigating, they then found Margaret's badly beaten body in her bathtub. According to the autopsy report, she died from blunt force trauma to the head, neck, and torso. When interviewed by authorities, David initially stated he had nothing to do with his mom's murder. But when police searched his phone, they found the 277 gruesome photos. Along with that, authorities also found Margaret's jewelry and 3 of her blank checks inside of a hotel room where David had been staying. David was arrested on September 4th, and during his trial, a defense expert stated that at the time of the murder, he had taken a high dosage of Adderall, which caused diminished mental capacity. His lawyer argued that the murder was strictly due to drug and alcohol use. David was initially facing a first-degree murder charge as well as abuse of a corpse, and if he was charged with that, he would have faced life in prison without parole. But unfortunately, he was allowed to enter a guilty plea, which dropped both of those charges, and instead he pleaded guilty to third-degree murder. He was sentenced to 20 to 40 years in prison, but since he's been behind bars since his arrest in 2019, he could potentially be released in just 17 years. And the scary part is that according to prison employees, they consider David a model prisoner who attends Bible studies with other inmates. And this makes the reality of him being released so soon a real possibility. It should be noted though that David had been arrested twice in the past for assaulting his mother and once for attacking his now deceased father. Adding to this, he also faces a pending case for allegedly waterboarding and strangling an ex-girlfriend, which also took place the year of the murder. David Sumney is a terrifying man, and the fact that he could ever be released back into society is a terrifying thing.
Tonight, we are in Indiana at the Randolph County Asylum.
It's the scariest place in America and very haunted.
All right, everybody, so we're here in the asylum, and we have our special guest.
We're here. Paranormal Nightmare, Paranormal Files.
The Nightmare Files.
Nightmare Files.
Yeah, there you go.
We've got the creeper. It looks like an octopus. We've got about 51 to 53 bodies buried out there and 1 mummy. Doris Addington is still very active in this kitchen. Now,
Oh my god. I came down. You saw it?
they want your attention.
That is absolutely crazy. Dude, what is this?
Oh, yeah. Would you like to have us back?
So what, you heard the female? Yeah. Who murdered you? Can you please tell us their name?
Hey, here's the butcher block.
Cattle. Trust me. Again.
Dude, that was crazy.
Yeah.
This story is disturbing. This former Arkansas state representative tried to adopt 3 girls. He then allegedly tried to have the girls exorcised before eventually rehoming them with a pedophile. So this is Justin Harris, and he and his wife tried to adopt 3 sisters in the year 2013. However, upon welcoming the 3 girls into their home, Justin and his wife discovered that the eldest sister had reactive attachment disorder, which prevents children from forging a bond with other children. The eldest sister then threatened to murder Justin's eldest 3 sons, and they never finalized her adoption. Justin and his wife then decided to give up on the whole thing when the middle daughter also was diagnosed with RAD. Keep in mind, at the time that these girls went into their house, they were 4 years, 2 years, and 9 months old. So in the spring of 2013, the family's babysitter, a girl named Chelsea Goldsboro, reported that the family was trying to perform exorcisms on the 3 young sisters. Chelsea later stated that Justin's wife, Marcia, told her the girls had demons and they could telepathically speak to each other, and that a demon was lifting up off the bed, like levitating, and that a, quote, demon was having sex with the middle sister. Justin and his wife have denied that this ever happened, but I don't know why a babysitter would make up such outlandish claims. And this is where the story gets really dark. So Justin and his wife didn't want to be charged with abandonment if they gave up the 3 girls. So instead of giving the girls back to the state, to the foster care system, they gave them to one of Justin's friends, a man named Eric Francis. Now, from the outside, Eric may have appeared that he would be a suitable father for these young girls, but Eric was a hardcore closeted pedophile. But you see, at the time, Eric was the head teacher at a Christian academy that Justin Harris ran. He already had other adopted children with his wife, and he was seen as a family man, a good, God-fearing guy. But only 6 months after he was given possession of the 3 girls, Eric was arrested and then eventually convicted of assaulting violently the 6-year-old middle child. So this obviously blew up into a massive scandal for Justin Harris. And after all of this happened, this was a huge scandal in the media. Justin announced he wouldn't be seeking another term in office, and he actually supported a bill against rehousing children. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife, Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms now.
This pensioner committed cold-blooded murder, and then she fed her victim to her neighbours. Sofia Zukova was an 81-year-old retired pig slaughterer, known as Granny Ripper. She's been linked to many unsolved murders in Russia, but one of her known victims was a 7-year-old schoolgirl named Anastasia Alexenko. Sofia said she murdered Anastasia because she was too noisy. It's actually thought that Sofia held Anastasia captive for around 3 weeks before killing her. Anastasia's mother actually received a phone call saying that her daughter was still alive. That phone call came from the sausage factory where Sofia worked. Anastasia's severed head was found in the town, but Sofia wasn't actually linked to that murder until 14 years later, when she murdered one of her tenants, and the police searched her home, finding Anastasia's DNA in her bathroom. Vasily Shlyakhtik was living here with Sofia as a tenant, and he was working as a janitor. He was a Ukrainian immigrant, and he suddenly went missing. This was in 2019, and his body parts soon started showing up around the town. Sofia had murdered him, saying that he had raped her, and what else was she supposed to do? She then dismembered his body and scattered the body parts around the town in bin bags. But the stray dogs had got to those bin bags and carried the body parts around the town. Searched Sofia's home, they found Vasily's internal organs in her fridge. It's unknown how many murders Sofia has actually committed, but her neighbours have said that Sofia would often cook treats for them and the local children, and they were always meat dishes. One neighbour in particular has said that Sofia brought her and her husband a plate of jellied meat, and it's now thought that these sweet treats were probably made from human meat. Sofia was of course arrested, and she happily demonstrated to police how she had killed Vasily with an axe, saying that she'd hit him 3 times in the head, but that he was still clucking. She was actually being held in a detention centre pre-trial when she contracted COVID-19 and she became really ill. She was transferred to hospital and she passed away before her trial even began. She still stands accused of the murders of Anastasia, Vasily, and her friend, also called Anastasia, and police have linked her to another 4 unsolved murders at least.
This killer accidentally admitted to his crimes by accident when he forgot he was wearing a microphone while taking part in a documentary. This is how a true crime documentary exposed a killer. In 1971, Robert Durst met Kathleen McCormack and they got married. At the time of her disappearance in 1982, Kathleen had nearly graduated college. She was last seen by a witness at a dinner party where she appeared to be upset. She got a call from Robert and left. Robert admitted to having argued with Kathleen that night, but he said he put her on a train to New York and then never saw her again. Her friend called police to report her missing. Interestingly, Kathleen had been treated at a medical centre for facial bruises weeks prior to this and told the friend that Robert had done it. Robert had actually been dating someone else for some time prior to this and had been living separately to Kathleen. When her family broke into her cottage to try and find out where she was, they found the place had been trashed and her possessions put in the bin. Kathleen's family always believed that Robert was involved in her disappearance. In 2000, Susan Berman, a friend of Robert's, was found murdered. Now, she'd actually provided Robert with an alibi for Kathleen's disappearance. Now, pay really close attention to this next bit. Days after she was killed, a letter addressed to the Beverly Hills Police Department contained Susan's address and the word cadaver on it. On the envelope, Beverly was misspelled. Robert admitted in 2005 that Susan had called him shortly before her death to say that the police wanted to question her about Kathleen going missing. It's believed that Robert killed Susan to keep her quiet. In 2001, Robert's neighbour's body parts were found floating in Galveston Bay. Robert's elderly neighbour, Morris Black, had been killed and Robert was arrested. He was actually released on bail and fled and was found about a month later in Pennsylvania. He was found with $37,000 cash, 2 weapons, and interestingly, Morris Black's driving licence. In court, Robert claimed he was acting in self-defence. He said he'd accidentally shot Morris and dismembered his body. Due to lack of forensics, he only got 5 years in jail. This is where things get really crazy. HBO was filming a documentary called The Jinx. During production, Susan's stepson found a letter written by Robert. This contained the same spelling error in the word Beverly as the anonymous letter to police. This implicated Robert in the murder. Now, while filming the documentary, Robert needed the toilet. He forgot that he had a microphone still attached to him. He was recorded talking to himself. He said, "There it is, you're caught. You're right, of course, but you can't imagine. Arrest him." And then he said, "What a disaster. He was right. I was wrong." And finally he said, "I'm having difficulty with the question. What the hell did I do? Killed them all, of course."
Hammer coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
Family of this missing girl found out via the media that she'd been murdered, butchered, and sold as kebab meat. This case will put you off ever eating a kebab again. Charlene Downs disappeared aged just 14 years old in November 2003. She was living in Blackpool, UK, and was last seen in an area containing many kebab shops and takeaways. While out with her friends one night, Charlene bumped into her mum. Her mum said that Charlene needed to be home by 10 p.m. that night, which was quite typical for Charlene. Tragically, this would be the last time that her mum would ever see Charlene alive. When Charlene didn't turn up by 10 p.m, her dad went out on his bike looking for her for around half an hour. When he couldn't find her, he just presumed that she'd stayed over at her friend's house and went home and went to sleep. When she still didn't arrive the next morning, her parents started to get worried and they called police. Police, however, said that they could not report this as a missing person until she'd been missing for 48 hours. Eventually, police did start to look for her, but they said that they presumed she was a runaway. The case went cold until 3 years later. Charlene's family were called into a police station. There was news of 2 men who had been arrested, linked with a local takeaway called Funny Boys. They were arrested on suspicion of murder and disposal of Charlene. This is when the family found out some shocking news via the media about what had happened to Charlene. An article published stated that she had been grinded up and sold as kebab meat. One of the brothers of the men who had been arrested had heard them bragging about doing this. Now, Charlene's disappearance actually unearthed the fact that these takeaways were being used as a front for pee rings, where men were luring teenagers in with food and alcohol in exchange for things I cannot repeat on this app. When the case against these 2 men went to trial, the jury failed to reach a verdict. The case was then thrown out of court due to apparent lack of physical evidence. One of the reasons for this is how well Charlene's body had obviously been disposed of. Both men who had been charged were given £250,000 compensation for being falsely trialled. Around a week after the trial, Charlene's mum was actually arrested for stabbing her husband. He declined to press charges, saying that he knew she had been stressed. Members of the family were also charged with racially aggravated assault against the brother of the man who'd been charged with murder, and also punching the man who'd been charged with helping dispose of her body. In August 2017, police arrested a 51-year-old man who lived in Blackpool at the time of Charlene's disappearance. This was on suspicion of murdering her. However, he was released just 2 days later. We still have no justice for Charlene, and nobody is behind bars for her killing.
This woman claimed to be a 9/11 survivor, but she wasn't even in America on the day of the attacks. This is Alicia Esteve Head, aka Tanya Head. So a few years after the attacks, Alicia, aka Tanya, started claiming that she survived the attacks and she was in the South Tower at the time that the plane hit the building. Even further, she claimed to have been on the 78th floor of the building above the plane's impact. She claimed that her fiance, aka her husband as she claimed later on, Dave, was killed during the attack, and that she had to crawl through the flames and smoke of the tower and she escaped. This would have made her one of only 19 people who survived at or above the point of impact that day, which means statistically that her survival would have been a miracle. So I'm going to call her Tanya from now on because that's what she was going with when she was doing all this. But in the years after the attacks, Tanya started up an online support group for 9/11 survivors. She wasn't paid for her involvement in this group, but she became the most prominent member of the group, and that's why she came to America in 2003. But let me remind you, Tanya had actually never been in America before the year 2003. She was living in Spain while all of this happened. So when she arrived in New York City, she was met with fanfare. People were excited to hear her story from her mouth. She was introduced to the then mayor of the city, Michael Bloomberg, pictured here. And she was even photographed with Rudy Giuliani, who was the mayor of New York at the time of the attacks. So Tanya had these severe burns on her arm that she claims she sustained during the attacks. So after she visited America, Tanya was interviewed by various news outlets. She was in the newspapers, she was on TV, and she was even invited to guide people around the wreckage of the World Trade Center, where she told people she was a survivor. But in 2007, the New York Times tried to verify Tanya's story, and what they discovered was shocking. She claimed that she had graduated from Harvard University and Stanford, but neither university had a record of her being there. She also claimed that at the time of the attack, she was working at Merrill Lynch in the South Tower, even though Merrill Lynch didn't have offices there. Shortly afterwards, a newspaper from Barcelona confirmed that she had actually been in class in Barcelona at the time of the attacks, and that she had told her friends and family members that she had actually sustained those burn marks on her arms from a bad automobile accident. So, shortly after her fraud was exposed, Alicia moved back to Barcelona, Spain. I mean, you gotta think about this. She was at the time the president of the World Trade Center Survivors Network. This was a huge, influential organization. And she had lied her way to the top of that organization, and no one really knows why she did it. Nowadays, she lives a normal, quiet life in Spain, but yeah, this is just a crazy story.
This woman poured boiling sugar all over her husband's body, and this case is absolutely mind-blowing. This case takes place in England on July 14th, 2020. Karina Smith was a 59-year-old woman and was married to an 81-year-old man named Michael Baines. I tried to find pictures of Michael, but I think none are available on the internet. Michael was in need of care due to his poor health, and because of their difference in age, Karina was able to become his primary caregiver. The two had a child together named Michael Jr., and Karina had another son and daughter from a previous relationship. But in 2007, her son Craig took his own life at just the age of 25. Before his death, he went to prison for attacking a man. Following this, Craig became distressed and spoke to his mother. He said the man he attacked was a predator, and that a predator had touched him inappropriately in the past. He said, "Mom, he's a predator." Shortly after this, Craig took his own life. Karina had formed a relationship with Michael while he was in his 40s and her in her 20s. She said the relationship was positive at first, but that was until his age began to become more noticeable, and things started to deteriorate as he aged. But despite this, she still provided Michael with the care he needed. On the 13th of July 2020, people who knew Karina said she had been acting differently and was described as angry and very upset. This was because her daughter had opened up about some horrific trauma both she and her now deceased brother had experienced at the hands of their stepfather, Michael. Karina's daughter told her that when they were younger, Michael would take advantage of them both and would touch them inappropriately. After Karina heard these allegations from her daughter, she remembered what her son told her about being attacked by a predator. The guilt of Craig's suffering from such a fate stayed with her for years, and a deep rage began to burn inside of her. On July 14th, 2020, at around 10 a.m., Karina returned to her home that she shared with Michael. She entered the home and grabbed a bucket, along with 3 kilograms of sugar that she had just bought. She then began to boil a large amount of water, creating a boiling syrup. Once this concoction was ready and scalding hot, Karina slowly entered Michael's bedroom. Michael was fast asleep and totally unaware that his wife was standing over him holding a bucket filled with boiling sugar. Filled with rage, Karina began to pour the boiling sugar all over her sleeping husband's body. Michael woke up and began to scream as the liquid destroyed his skin. This mixture of sugar and boiling water is often referred to as prison napalm, due to the horrific burns it can cause. Once the bucket was empty, Karina ran over to her neighbor's house, which was 9 doors down. She banged on the door until the neighbor answered. Karina didn't know her well, but told her what she had done. The neighbor called the police and explained what happened, and when the police arrived, they entered the home and found Michael whimpering in bed with skin on his arms and torso beginning to peel off. Michael was rushed to the hospital and Karina was arrested. Karina was then asked why she did this to her husband, in which she explained what her daughter told her, and that she became so enraged that she poured the liquid all over her husband. Michael was able to be stabilized but suffered burns to 36% of his body, and 2 weeks later, Michael passed away from his injuries. Karina was then charged with murder and was then found guilty of murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 12 years. Cases like this always cause division. To some, Karina was a hero and someone who took revenge to protect her children, while others see her as a reckless murderer who killed her husband based off one simple allegation. So let me know your opinion on this crazy case.
This is Woody Allen, one of the most disgusting men in Hollywood. This is a man who literally married and had children with his ex-lover's stepdaughter. Oh yeah, and he's also allegedly a pedophile, so let's talk about all this. So Woody Allen is a famous Hollywood director, comedian, actor. He's produced and directed a number of films, some of which people consider to be classics. And this guy is one of the most well-known directors in the history of Hollywood. So in the year 1980, Woody Allen began a relationship with the actress Mia Farrow. At the time that they met, Mia already had 7 children. Now, Mia and Woody's relationship was really rocky throughout the entire thing, but let me tell you, some of the stuff that happened throughout this relationship is just downright disgusting. So, 1977, Mia Farrow adopts Soon-Yi Previn. She is from Korea, and she was 7 years old when she was adopted, which means that she was only 10 years old when Mia began her relationship with Woody Allen. Now, allegedly, according to Woody and Soon-Yi, their relationship didn't really start until she was a little bit older, basically in 1990. But that's also when this takes an extremely disturbing twist. So here's a picture of Woody Allen, Mia Farrow, the adopted kids. Here's Soon-Yi over here. So in January of 1992, after she had been together with Woody Allen for 12 years, Mia Farrow was in Woody's home and she found nude photographs of her adopted daughter, Soon-Yi. Woody Allen then told Mia Farrow that he had taken those nude photos of Soon-Yi the day before and that they had had relations 2 weeks ago. Now, immediately Mia Farrow lawyered up and so did Woody Allen. Now, keep in mind, Woody Allen and Mia Farrow had a biological child together. And Mia had just found photos of her stepdaughter, nude photographs, in her partner's house. So then, according to court testimony, in August of 1992, something even more disturbing happened. Apparently on that day, Woody had come over to Mia's house to visit the children. Now, according to a babysitter on that day, they walked in and saw Woody Allen on his knees lying on the floor, and his head was in the lap of Dylan Farrow, who at the time was a very, very young minor. Now, according to Mia Farrow's personal testimony, when she asked her own child what had happened with Woody, her child told her that Woody had touched her private part. So eventually these allegations went nowhere. They just remained that, allegations. Still, to this day, Dylan Farrow, who is now a grown adult, says that this all happened and it's true, and she remembers that this happened. And it also should be noted that Woody Allen eventually married Mia's adopted daughter, Soon-Yi, right here in 1997. And they are still a couple to this day. They have been married for over 20 years and have kids of their own. So my question is, and the question that everybody else still has really, is that if you're willing to look at your romantic partner's adopted daughter as a potential future wife, what else are you capable of or willing to do? And I think this is just one of those stories that there will never be conclusive proof of. But I do know that this behavior is just so strange and creepy to me.
This 23-year-old TikToker has just been found guilty of murder. This story is just insane. So, hi, I'm Meg. I talk about true crime. Let's get into it. At the time of the crime, Mahek Buhari was 23 years old. She had nearly 130,000 TikTok followers, 45,000 on Instagram, and thousands on YouTube as well. She made videos on makeup, lifestyle, fashion, stuff like that, and she was beginning to make a name for herself on multiple platforms. Her mother featured in a few of her videos, and they seem to be really close. Her mother's name was Ansreen, and she is 46 years old. This whole situation began around 3 years ago when her mother started a secret affair with a younger man. The man's name was Saqib, and he was only 19, I believe, when this affair started, and she was like in her 40s. He quickly fell in love with Ansreen. Sorry if I'm saying any of these names wrong, they're kind of difficult for me to pronounce. But she was married, and to her this was just like a fun little affair on the side. She had been married to her husband for over 20 years, and he did not know about this affair. The only person who knew about the affair was Mahek, the TikToker. Saqib really wanted a real relationship, and he wanted to woo her, so he spent thousands on her. It said somewhere that he spent around £2,000 trying to impress her. Fast forward to 2022, Ansreen wanted to end this relationship. He was getting pretty obsessed with her, so she just wanted nothing to do with it anymore. After she tried ending things got pretty intense really quick. Saqib started threatening her because he had certain videos and pictures of them together, if you know what I mean. He was blackmailing her, being like, if you leave me, I will send these to your son and your husband. And obviously she did not want these intimate moments being shown to her son, and she did not want her husband finding out either, because that would be bad. Like I said before, Mahek was the only person who knew about this affair, so her mother turned to her for help. She turned to her 23-year-old daughter. The two spoke about it over WhatsApp, which is just mistake number one. If you're gonna try to like take someone out, call about it, don't text it. There's a text from Mahek to her mother saying, "I'll soon get him jumped by guys and he won't know what day it is." So it doesn't necessarily mention murder, but it does, prove that she wanted to do something. Mahek, alongside her mother, decided to arrange a meeting with Saqib to give him back the $2,000 he spent on Ansreen. 11th of February 2022, the police get a frantic phone call from Saqib. Here's a transcript of the call if you want to fully read it. You can pause now. TikTok just deleted the other half of this video and I've just finished the makeup, so I'm just going to continue the story. In this phone call, Saqib is frantically trying to get the police to help him because he's being followed very closely. And he claimed in the phone call that the people following him were wearing balaclavas, which are like masks kind of. And he says, "They're trying to ram me off the road. They're trying to kill me. I'm going to die." He was not alone in the car. He was with his friend, his childhood friend called Mohammed. As the police were trying to get him some help, the phone call ended after he screamed and there was a huge crashing noise. Saqib's car was rammed off the road by another car off of the A64 dual carriageway. The car immediately was engulfed in flames and both the young men lost their lives. All because a woman didn't want her husband to know that she was cheating on him. Well, he knows now because the police obviously found out about it. The bodies were so badly burnt that they had to be identified using dental records. It was pretty clear that this wasn't an accident because of the 999 call he made earlier. Just so you guys know, this is in England. I feel like I've not mentioned that yet. I'm not really sure how the police actually found out who was involved. Like, that whole part was not anywhere that I could personally find. But they ended up at Mahek's house and she claimed that she was home all evening. She later then changed her story, saying that she had been there, but she wasn't involved at all. In fact, in this video footage you're seeing right now, her car was the one with the red arrow. And her mother, Ansreen, was also there with her. The police confiscated Mahek's phone and asked for the password, and she gave them the wrong password, which is like sketchy as hell. When they asked her why she gave them the wrong code, she was like, oh, I was stressed out and gave you the wrong code, but it's really because she probably didn't want them reading the text messages, saying she was going to get Saqib jumped. Mehek actually said in court that she had lied to the police multiple times, but her, alongside everybody else involved, were claiming that they were innocent, that they had nothing really to do with it. It was all an accident. But after the trial, they were all found to be guilty. Every single one of the drivers involved. I think that there was one that was let go, but I don't actually really know the situation behind that because the information is not very good at the moment because it's all very new, so it's kind of hard to find what I need. I don't think that the sentencing has been done yet because I can't actually find a number of years that her and her mother and everyone involved will be in prison for, but they're definitely going to prison. I think I read somewhere that the sentencing will be done in September, but I'm not 100% sure on that information. Like I said, it's very scarce. And that's the entire case from what I could find. It's insane to me that those two young men lost their lives because of this. Like, it's so ridiculous. It's creepy because her TikTok account is still, like, up. And it's weird to look at, like, her videos. She probably had no idea that her last video was going to be her last video. I would love to hear what you guys have to say about this case / what case you want me to do next. I'm so mad that TikTok deleted that half of the video because the actual process was really cool into doing this makeup. But I hope that you guys still enjoyed the video regardless. I'm a little angry about it. When you're watching this video, I will be on a plane. I'm going to Canada for 3 weeks to visit some family. I have pre-recorded some videos, so you will still have your true crime, don't worry. If I have a free day, I will definitely film another true crime video while I'm in Canada, but that really depends on like what I'm doing every day. It would be kind of cool to do it in like a different setup. I don't know. I'm literally filming the pre-recorded videos after this one, so I'm literally gonna have to take off my makeup, film the other video, take off my makeup, film the other video, and my skin is not going to be happy. That's everything for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!